to Growing Up in Easton. Today is February 18th, 2025, and I'm Priscilla Almquist-Olsen, your host. And today we have two classmates from Oliver Ames' class of 1964. To my left, Ginny Moore Murray, and her very best friend, Joanne Duhamel, England. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's great to have you.
Nice
oh,
to
I
have
have
you.
been bugging these two for months to come on
true.
this show.
That's
and I guess
true.
they finally felt guilty enough to come. So tell me a little bit about your earliest memories of growing up in Easton. What was it like here?
Well, I grew up in Southeastern most of the time. I was 2 years old when my parents moved here from Cleveland, Ohio. And my grandmother and obviously my father grew up in Brockton, so he came home to see his family, and they stayed in this area. So we first rented the second floor of 226 Turnpike Street, where the Tuckers live now, and they do that big Christmas display. And so we rented the second floor above the Fosey family. My best friends at that time were the Bergerons, Donna Bergeron, and all of the siblings.
And my classmate Callista.
And Callista, of course. I thought Callista was beautiful.
And Mike and Mark.
All of them, yep, all of them. And so, and Diane Baker lived just down the street. And so those were my earliest memories of being there until I was about 8 years old. And then we moved to 17 Foundry Street, where I grew up on the second floor of the Thomas Farm. Then finally, for the last location in Easton before I got married, we moved to the Five Corners. So I went from Southeastern to another spot in Southeastern, and then the what we call the Boondocks. So it was pretty remote then. In those days, there were houses on every corner at the Five Corners, except for Barbosa's garage. So it was an interesting time.
Yeah.
So that's where I grew up. And you grew up in...
I grew up in Northeastern on Barrow Street, and my mother was a townie, and her mother had a lot on Barrow Street that was empty. So my parents, after they were married, they built a house on that lot next to my grandmother. So my neighborhood was my Mecca, actually, and my best friends were Sharon Baird, Marie Tuck, the Colemans, down on Jean Jacobs, Day Street would be the Coes, the Cousiners. And my cousins lived directly next door to me, Jerry and Bobby Burbank. So it was a real close-knit, happy little neighborhood. And one thing I remember about growing up in Northeastern is I was so fortunate to be near the park, Frothingham Park, and there were sidewalks everywhere to walk to downtown, which was like going to the city, because the downtown was so active and vital at that time. But that's my early recollection of peace and quiet and happy memories.
Did you play tennis on the tennis courts?
Yes, we did. We did everything that the park would offer.
Yeah.
Yep, and the swings, and they had the rings. I don't know if you remember them, Priscilla. The rings
yeah.
you would go kill your blisters, and yeah, we did everything down it. We hung out at that, and again, we were within walking distance of the library, so we very often went to the library. In the summer, we'd swim at Flyaway Pond. I'd go to the cinema downtown.
How much was it then?
I was trying to think of that on the way over, and I couldn't remember.
Well, I'm 4 years older than you. I was class of 1960, and I remember it was 25 cents.
That's what I remember.
I was thinking it was around there.
And it was two feature-length films.
Yep.
The comics and the newsreel.
Yes.
I remember the newsreels, and I just thought of it the other day that before any of those movies, we
Yes.
saw the World War II
It's true.
reels.
Yes.
And it was amazing.
It was amazing.
All black and white.
Right.
And, I mean, we were the first post-war babies. We were the original baby boomers, born in 46.
Right.
So, I hate to
Right,
say publicly what my age is, but whatever.
I think they have a clue.
Yeah, class of '64. Yeah, that was a big clue. But it's fine. It's fine now. So we have a long history here. But I was thinking the other day that I learned to walk everywhere because we lived in a purely residential areas. There was nothing around unless we went to the park. So I walked everywhere with my siblings, and I was one of four. So my brother, being the oldest, would be the one to lead the pack. And so we'd go down Turnpike Street all the way to Howard's store, and he'd lead the pack. We'd go by the Bassett house and say hi to Bonnie and Jeff. We'd go by the Manchester house, and Judy Manchester was there. We went all the way to Howard's store, which is now a preschool, I think. I think there's this, and we'd go in, and in the front they had all this penny candy. Did you ever go there?
No, we had O'Connor's news store, so we had penny candy galore there.
Right.
Well, the thing that was funny is that if we were to misbehave along the way, any mother on that street could call our mothers, because our mothers didn't work at that time. And they'd be home and they'd say, I saw your kids doing this or that. And so we didn't get away with anything.
No.
Not that we always tried to, but yes, it was a different time.
It was, and I think parents felt responsible for all the children in town.
I think you're right.
So if a parent was walking and saw the child, another person's child, and they were doing something that was inappropriate, that parent would just walk over and say, "Hey, this is not appropriate. Your parents would not appreciate this. Do you think I should call them?" "Oh, no, I'll be okay."
But it was funny, all the rumors, the occurrence that did happen that was bad would be spread throughout our little community, and everybody would know that kid was caught doing something.
But it was a safety net, too, when you think about it.
Yes. It was very peaceful and quiet.
Even at church, if we were running down the hall, I say I probably was being a good girl, but if kids were running down the hall, any parent could say, "Hey, you don't run in church."
Right.
And things. I think that was a good thing. I wish it could be like that now. I think sometimes people might be a little overly sensitive, or overly protective, because I never ran into a problem with that.
Don't you think a part of that social culture was due to the fact that there were only 5,000 people in town
Oh,
then?
that's true.
True.
And now we have, 27,000?
Yes, so many, yeah.
So it's more than 5 times the size. And when I came home 22 years ago, and I'm staying in the house that my parents built. It was my childhood home, which is wonderful. But I didn't recognize these streets. And I was working at the polls, and someone's giving me their address, and I said, "Oh, where is that?" And so there are new neighborhoods all throughout Easton that we never knew.
Right.
There were a lot of farms, and that's what I remember, because when we lived on Foundry Street near the West Bridgewater line, there was Michelson's, and there was the Thomas farm, and the Algers ran a farm. And so when we lived there for 3 years, I saw a calf being born. I helped pick strawberries in the garden out back. My dad had a garden, and he rented space, or somebody let him use space on their yard on Bay Road. And so after supper, when we lived at 17 Foundry Street, we'd all get in the car, he'd go weed the garden, and then he'd take us down to Winnicott to swim. And on the way back, we'd walk barefoot into Burrell's store, which was at the end of Highland Street at that time. Oh. And then it relocated to Foundry Street, where Village Store came into being. But I still remember getting out of the car, running in to get an ice cream cone from Burrell's, and the screen door would slam at our back, and we were all wet and barefoot. And that was just the way it was.
Okay then, back then.
No one thought anything about it, and I got my 10-cent ice cream cone.
Right. And what memories do you have?
Something that cropped up when I was thinking of this is the bus system. And I don't know if you remember that we could easily take the bus from Northeastern to Brockton and go to the big theater, the big movie theaters, and do our shopping. And I started, I think, in middle school being allowed to do this. with a friend, and I know Barbara Freitas was one of them, and I don't know if that was even earlier, but we'd go down and walk down Oakland Avenue in front of Copeland's funeral home, and the bus would come by and take us to Brockton. And my parents, I mean, there was a sense of safety and freedom in doing all that back then.
Well, you know, my brother and Sean talked about how their parents would give them a quarter to get on the bus.
Yes, so they remembered that as
Yeah,
well.
but they pocketed that quarter.
Oh, and the bus driver let them?
No,
Nope.
they didn't take the bus. They hitchhiked.
Oh, my goodness. No, I took the bus.
And I think they were in middle school.
Wow.
Yeah,
So-
they would drop you off in front of BPM and pick you up there later.
Uh-huh.
And it was, Brockton was bustling,
And for everybody, BPM is Brockton Public Market.
which became Shaw's.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I remember that. And I also remember as we became teenagers, and a lot of the, it was boys only, but girls certainly, as we know from Debbie Coe's recent article, Fixing Cars, a lot of the boys would fix up their cars into hot rods. And that became a big thing on Main Street, that whenever you went down to Main Street, Northeastern, there'd always be the latest model or the latest done-up car, which we all contributed like a dime or a quarter, and that person would take us to Brockton to cruise the drag.
Right.
Oh, I remember doing that.
yeah.
Yes, we used to do that for excitement. I don't know if our parents knew, but that's what we did.
Did you also visit the shops? I mean, there was Edgar's, Frazier's,
Edgar's and Frazier's, Kempton's,
Kempton, yeah,
Gilchrist.
absolutely. Gilchrist,
Kennedy's,
Kennedy's.
Yulian's.
Well, my mom always went to Frazier's.
Frazier's.
But, you know, you were either a Frazier's or an Edgar's family. And my mom was a Frazier's person, so that's where we went. But I still remember, I do remember seeing the Santa Claus that year in Brockton on Main Street
Oh, okay.
at Christmas time. And I also remember very faintly the smell of Asian food. Like there was a little restaurant downtown, and you could go by and you could smell
That was-
all the the Chinese food and
That
it
was
delicious.
at the BPM. There was the man that made it, and he was in the window, I do believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a big draw to that market.
Yes, and Kresge's was down there.
Yes.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
got all of the Christmas. My parents gave us $1 each, and we could go to Kresge's and buy Christmas presents for everyone. And I had
so
4
fun.
siblings, so it's a quarter gift to each. And I remember the wood floors of Kresge's because they made a sound when you walked. They were old wood floors, and they had bins where they had little things like little dogs and cats and little barrettes and things. And sure enough, I found Christmas presents for all my siblings.
Wow.
I
For
used to do my
$1.
Christmas shopping at Barn Hills, actually, and I remember $1 would go a long way back then.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So Brockton was almost like a part of Easton because of the bus that took us there, but also because of it was a beautiful main street. I mean, all these wonderful stores, beautiful. It was really. I mean, the only thing missing was the Ritz-Carlton. You know.
You're right.
And the big theater. There were 2 big theaters and the restaurants and everything. It was high class. And that's how I remember. But back in Easton, you mentioned O'Connor's News Store, which is now the Farmer's Daughter.
Mama's daughter.
And did you ever sit at the fountain?
I didn't in O'Connor's, but I did at Abbott's or Crane's, and I did at Easton Pharmacy. When we got older, and I'm sure she hated seeing us come in, was Dorothy Jean's restaurant. We'd all go down for Coke and French fries, you know, a whole group of us after school. And I'm like thinking to this day, that woman, I know she didn't like us sitting there because we sat there to socialize. And
Right.
that's all we ordered was a Coke and French fries.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
And I remember the booths that were at O'Connor's News Store.
yes, there was only like 2, I think.
Yes, they were. There were just 2 booths, and they were next to the fountain
That's
with all the
correct.
stools and so forth. And I remember ordering a graveyard Coke. Did you ever know about the graveyard Coke?
No, I never did.
Okay, well, a lot of people ordered cherry Cokes
Yeah, or orange Coke.
or orange Coke, but most of my friends, we ordered the graveyard Coke, and that was all the syrups that they
Oh,
had
my goodness.
put all into the Coke, a little bit of
My
everything.
goodness, I never heard of that.
Nope.
I don't think I would have liked that. I like my orange
Well, I
Coke.
guess they had buried that by the time you kids came along.
Good one.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And do you remember Matrano's? And
Yes.
I do. Yeah,
yes,
I remember
definitely.
Matrano's.
Yep. Yeah, Matrano's, and there was a liquor store next to that. I don't know. Probably Matrano's.
Yes,
I'm
it
not
was
sure.
Matrano's liquor. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then there was Carl the barber, Carl
Yes.
Guglia, who Kay went to school with us, and David, I think, is her brother. Yep. And then, of course, there was Connie Galvin's barber shop
barber
across
shop.
the street. Yeah.
Right next to Howard Insurance.
Howard Insurances.
Right.
No longer is. Yeah, next to Easton Pharmacy.
Right.
And the dentist upstairs. Do you remember the dentist upstairs
No.
from Easton Pharmacy?
Uh-uh.
There was a Dr. Zimbinski. If you read Facebook,
Yes.
you'll get all sorts of stories. We all had been to her at one time or another.
Even I did. Having had a toothache once in the middle of early evening, she was the only one that was available, and she pulled it. She pulled my
Of course
tooth out,
she did.
and it wasn't. She said, "You are a brave girl."
Yeah, there were quite some fascinating stories about
There
that woman.
were, yeah.
Yeah. She didn't really believe in Novocaine.
I guess not.
I don't remember that.
I know, I don't know for sure. I don't know what the facts are, but of course, the fear of dentists started at a very early age for all us kids. So even if she was good,
Yeah. Now tell me, you mentioned Abbott's, and that was Abbott's Pharmacy. Where was that located?
that was right on the corner of Lincoln and I guess it's Center Street.
It's where the
It used to be Howard.
dry cleaners
I'm sorry, yeah, dry cleaners.
was the last occupant.
I can't think of the name of it now, but yes,
Right.
there's nothing in there now.
No, but how could we had 2 or 3 pharmacies, right?
Yeah, you did. You had Abbott's and then Easton Pharmacy, then Southeastern Pharmacy, I think became Abbott's.
Then there was Zorella's.
Yeah, Zorella's. That was
That was Easton Pharmacy.
Easton Pharmacy.
Oh yeah, and that was Bob Carpenter. Did Bob
Yes,
work there?
Bob was
yes,
there.
I remember Bob.
Yep.
Yeah,
was
everybody remembered
Easton
Bob
Pharmacy.
Carpenter. He was wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And
And
there
he
was-
always had a cure for whatever ailed you.
yeah, he was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
We miss you, Bob.
Definitely.
And when we were growing up, the railroad station really wasn't anything. It was just an abandoned station. And also the shovel shop was more or less abandoned by that time. And there was also a big factory down there behind where Howard Insurance was on that street.
Oh, yeah.
Mechanic.
I
it
think that was a
shoe-
nail factory
Was it a nail factory?
way back when.
Yeah.
And it might have become a thread factory after
It
that.
was
I'm
a
not sure.
big hulking
We have
factory.
We'll have to ask Ed Hands.
I think it burned or whatever.
It burned down, right?
Yeah.
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 I was just remembering that my dad used to go to J. O'Dean down below where that car wash is now.
Right.
Down, and I can't remember what he went down there for.
Did he go for, did he have, well, gardening supplies? I know my great-grandfather worked there.
Right. It was a
And
mill.
it was a grain
Yeah.
mill.
A grain mill. And some of us tried very hard to save it, but we lost that one. Too
That's a
bad.
big loss, yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I know.
So when you were in high school, what kind of fun things did you do?
I was a singer, so
You were
I was
more involved than I was, I
we're,
think.
We're doing a Ruth Ashley open house at the Historical Society on Sunday, and I've been thinking a lot about her. She always had the annual musicals, and I was in them from 9th grade on, and just wonderful. But we had, I would say, the golden age of teachers, because we all loved them. We had
did.
Mr. Nixon, Mr. Moscato, Mrs. Ashley, Mr. Worcester, Mrs. Varela.
Yeah, we did.
We had
We
so
had
great
many
teachers.
wonderful, wonderful teachers.
Did you have
Ken
Miss
Burke.
Foster?
Miss Foster, that's right, yes.
Oh, yeah,
I
she
don't
was.
remember
Ninth
her.
grade English, was it?
Yeah, well, I had her for senior English. Yeah, she was really top.
And don't forget Miss Harvey.
Oh, yeah.
Harvey for algebra. No, you didn't have her?
No.
Yeah. Okay. And then,
Okay.
and then who was the physical?
Healy,
And
I'm
Elizabeth
sorry.
Barrows wasn't she for gym?
Yes, but not for us, though.
Yeah, we had Sue Rivard.
Sue Rivard.
Oh, see, I didn't know her. Right? Yeah, she came later. And
Actually, it
who
was
was the
Kay Healy.
man that was the Valenti?
Oh, Mr.
Oh, Mr. Valenti,
He
yes,
was the principal.
Well, you know what? Isn't that amazing? That just popped out of my head.
I know, it's funny, these names just,
Yeah,
I know.
yeah. They go back so many years.
I think
And
my brother had Peter McConerty
oh
at
yeah,
the high
Oh,
school.
yeah.
he was the principal.
He was a principal.
and
but-
Julian Pruce was.
And Julian
yeah,
Pruce
he
was
was
more
our
high school
high
years.
He was a guidance counselor, and then he became principal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so many wonderful memories.
Did you
and-
ever have sleepovers? We called them
Yes.
pajama parties.
Yes, we had pajama parties. We did call them that, pajama parties.
Yeah.
I remember a couple at Anne Mary Moen's house on the corner of William Street and Main Street,
Right.
like right up there. And
No, it
we
was
used-
actually the corner of
Was
Jenny Lynn and
Jenny
Williams.
Lynn and it was on William Street,
Right,
though, right?
on William Street. It's the big Victorian house.
And we were out in the lawn cavorting around, and then the sprinklers came on, and then Anne Mary's mom had to deal with the police because we were too
Oh, my
noisy.
goodness.
Somebody called in a complaint about us. We were really good kids, but a little loud. And
yeah,
so,
and in those days, the police station was down there on Mechanic Street.
Yes, that's
It
right.
was.
the
And
little one.
it's now a law office, but it was a small little building because
It
in
was.
those days there were only 3 police offices, I think, and it had one cell. That's it, one jail cell. Yeah.
Interesting.
I
and so it
remember
wasn't-
that little police station.
Yeah,
You?
I do, yes.
So it just come up, it was almost on Main Street. It was on Mechanic, Main. And then they just cross over to William, and they were right there. They could have walked, or did they come in the cars?
One time after cruising in the drag one Sunday night, there was a car that was following me, and it made me very nervous because I was alone. And for some weird reason, why would I be doing,
know,
maybe
but
I wasn't
anyway.
cruising the drag that day. But
Maybe
anyway.
you weren't alone.
There was a car that seemed to be following me. And so I didn't know what to do. So I pulled into the little police station, and the car pulled in behind me and said, "I'm sorry." It was another kid just being silly. So it's like, no, okay. So I never went in, but I remember that little police station.
Funny. Yeah, it was little.
I also remember the little tiny post office down on Pequannock Avenue.
Oh, okay.
That wasn't our post office, but I was always walking around that area, so that's long gone now too.
Yeah, and I understand there was a post office at the end of Center where Depot comes in. Wasn't there one there?
I don't remember that.
Oh, okay. But, we have so many little hamlets, shall we say.
Yes, that's
So
true.
I think in the early days, that's before us, post offices were in every little hamlet. So Furnace Village, Unionville,
Yes.
Southeastern, Pequannock, yeah. Now, did either one of you go to the Pequannock school?
No, I didn't. I
No,
know
but
people that have, but I
I think
didn't.
my first husband, Waldo Crookshank, I think he did. I think he
Oh,
lived
okay.
in Pequannock Ave, and I think he did.
Yeah, but then there was a time when I was supposed to be in 5th grade, I think, and I was in Northeastern, and they were trying to get more students in that building, so they wanted me to go there. But my mother said, no, she walks to school, to Northeastern Grammar.
Yeah,
That's the way it is.
that was so easy to walk to school.
right. And
Now,
then,
did they have the white bench there when you were little?
oh, of course, they
Yeah,
still
they
have
did.
it.
Oh,
For me too.
Still have it. And I remember going home for lunch and then coming back. Oh, we have 5 minutes. Okay, so tell us some more stories.
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 Okay,
Well, I will say that we had black and white TV. We had
Yep.
no fast food restaurants in
Correct.
town. It was the Cold War, and I remember doing drills under my desk.
Oh, yeah.
Do you
Me
remember
too.
that?
Yes.
And the funniest thing is that Center School, with all those glass windows, that would have been no protection for us if there had ever been an event. But we used to get under our desks and put our hands behind our neck.
As if that would help.
As if that would help. We didn't know, but I don't remember being scared. I just remember doing it.
We had trust in our country.
We did.
And we were very patriotic, and on Memorial Day, we'd decorate our bikes in red, white, and blue crepe paper and go to the parades or whatever, wave our flags.
We watched Big Brother Bob Emery.
Oh, yes.
And he had the salute to the president.
That's
We'd
right,
get a glass
with
of
a
milk.
glass of milk.
And they'd play the Hail to the Chief.
Yep.
And we would see a picture of Eisenhower.
Right.
And we would drink our milk.
That's right.
And then when Miss Frances had her ding dong school, she would say, now go get your mommies and let's show them what we did today. And our mommies were home, were not working most of them. My mom wasn't working. And so she would come in from the kitchen and watch the show. But all of that kind of howdy doody, all of those shows were great.
Yeah, and Princess Summer, Fall, Winter, Spring.
Oh, Howdy Doody, yeah.
Howdy Doody.
And Clarabelle the Clown.
Phineas T. Buster.
I never knew that Princess Summer, Fall, Winter, Spring was teaching us our seasons.
Oh.
I just thought it was her name.
Yes, me too.
I remember when Clarabelle made a visit to Edgar's store.
Oh.
The real Clarabelle, and I remember being petrified of him because he had the seltzer bottle. Do you remember that?
I do.
He would chase I thought for some reason Clarabelle was going to squirt me with his seltzer bottle.
Yeah, and what we're talking about for those younger people who are watching this, Clarabelle was on the Howdy Doody show, and that came on at 5 o'clock, I believe, or 5:30.
That sounds about right.
And then Big Bob Emery followed at 6, and we sat there, and then Hopalong Cassidy and
sure.
and
Roy
the Lone
Rogers.
Ranger. Remember all
So
those?
innocent, all that, when you look back at it.
It was all innocent. It
Yeah.
was, they make fun of us and say, Happy Days wasn't real, but it was.
It was. It was real.
Yeah,
It was.
It was real.
the Fawns.
Yep.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything wrong with it that I can remember.
No.
Yeah. So we have like 2 minutes left. Tell me, what's your fondest memory?
Just growing up in Easton and the friendliness of the neighborhood and the people, the beautiful town in itself, with all the mansions and the estates that we could walk through.
And for me,
And
the
pick the
wonderful
daffodils.
teachers. Oh, the daffodils. The
daffodils.
wonderful teachers we had. I had Mrs. B. Shell in first grade, and she was really a wonderful, wonderful teacher. And then I had Miss Nelson, who became Mrs. Naraki, whose dad was the superintendent of schools in Brockton at that time. And she was a wonderful, wonderful teacher. So all the way through, I think that's probably why I became a teacher.
Yeah, and tell me, one of the overriding themes on this show has been the independence that we were afforded.
That's right.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I always felt that you could, like I said, we felt free. Nothing held us back. We could almost do whatever we wanted growing up. Of course, there was guidance, but I just had a sense of freedom. I really did.
We ran in packs as neighborhood kids all together, groups. And so we would play a pickup game of touch football, or we would play Red Rover, or all of those kid games. But I could wander until supper time.
And when the lights came on,
Would go in.
the street lights came
and
on.
would behave ourselves.
Right. And when the street lights came on, we had to go home.
That's right.
But I think that's why most of us from that era are very independent, very opinionated, very responsible,
you're
very
right.
self-sufficient.
True.
And when you mentioned we could do anything, you became a nurse.
Yes.
You became a teacher. I became a teacher and then a lawyer. I mean, what do you think
I
of all
know.
that independence? And now we have helicopter parents in town.
I know.
Anyway, time's up. It's been wonderful.
Oh, it's been fun.
Joanne Duhamel, England, and Ginny Moore Murray. Thank you both. It's been really lots of fun.
Priscilla. It has been fun.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And for all those of you at home, I hope you've enjoyed it. Till next time, be well.